Hi, in this second video of the series on database options, I'm going to talk about auto-create statistics. Now, before we can talk about auto-create statistics, it's probably a good idea to understand what statistics are. And in its very simplest term, a statistic for a table is essentially just an idea about the distribution of unique values within that database. It's an understanding of the cardinality of the data and how many rows could potentially be called when you query for a specific value. Again, that's a very simplistic example, but for all intents and purposes, what happens when you run a query is SQL Server needs to get an idea about how many rows are being fetched. And in order to do that, it looks for the statistics. And if the statistics are up to date, it gives SQL Server a better idea about how many rows will be fetched, and that in turn helps SQL Server come up with an optimized query plan because it'll know how much amount of RAM will be sufficient, whether there will be a need to spool to the temp database, whether parallelism is needed, and a number of other optimizations. Even the type of join that you might end up using purely depends on the number of rows that statistics tell the optimizer will be qualified. So this is again one of those features where I think it's really a no-brainer, and you should obviously enable statistics is equal to true, or auto-create statistics is equal to true. And to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just show you this very simple script. And as you can see right now in my database, under options, if you go to auto-create statistics, that's going to be set to false. I will talk about auto-increment as well, auto-create incremental statistics later. That has more to do with partitions, so that'll come further down the line. Now in this query, what I'm doing basically is first I'm looking for any statistics on a table called partition, and as you can see at the moment I don't have any statistics on the table. The next thing I'm doing is I'm altering the database and setting auto create statistics is equal to off, which it already is, so it shouldn't really be a problem. After which, inside the table partition, I'm querying object name and object counter. I've purposely kept this query fairly simple because I don't want other factors like grouping or sorting and temp tables being created to affect the numbers. So this is a very basic select statement with a simple where condition. And if I go ahead and run this query, so let me just go ahead and set statistics time IO on. When I do this, you'll see that I'm running it twice, mainly because I just want SQL Server to get an idea about the query in the first attempt as well as the query in the second attempt. So when I run this, you'll see right now at this moment, this query is still executing and we've got the same number of logical reads, no read ahead reads. So obviously that means that the data is in the buffer pool. And we're looking at an execution time of roughly about 3 seconds. And if you look at the execution plan, it'll give you a very clear idea about where the problem is, because you'll see as soon as we look into the execution plan, we get a warning on the clustered index seek, which is basically telling us that if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a message there saying column with no statistics, partition demo object name. So there's a column that I'm using and it doesn't have statistics, and that's kind of messing with SQL Server's understanding of the data. A better example would be when you hover over the arrow here, you'll see the estimated number of rows at this point is showing 2,236. And that is obviously not correct, because if you look at the actual number of rows, you will see the actual number is 116,150. So that probably should be sufficient indicator that there is definitely some key role that statistics plays in the overall execution of SQL Server. So let's look at this in a bit more detail now. If I hover over the next one, you'll see again we've got a messed up number in terms of the estimated number of rows versus the actual. Having said that, let's now go ahead and enable auto create statistics. And let's run this query again. And for all purposes, you'll see that it's still roughly the same amount of data that's being, it's the same amount of data being fetched, same number of logical reads. You'll also notice that the execution time hasn't really changed much. It's still around 3 seconds. But now when we come into the execution plan, you'll see that the warning has disappeared from the cluster index scan. And that means that SQL Server has sufficient information to clearly understand the amount of rows that it needs to fetch. And that's even more obvious when we look at the oops, sorry. when we look at the arrow connecting the cluster index to the parallelism gather stream. So you'll see right now when we look at this, we can see the estimated number of rows is 115,364 versus 116,150, and having a more accurate size for the rows, having a more accurate amount of count for the number of rows that qualify helps downstream operations where SQL Server is better able to understand how much RAM needs to be utilized, etc. And this is kind of important in terms of why we want statistics always to be enabled. When we enable statistics, what happens is SQL Server immediately goes ahead, before executing the query, if the statistics is not available, creates a statistics and therefore has a better idea about how to go about doing the job. So it just gives SQL Server that much bit more additional information that will help SQL Server create a better optimized plan. I'm also going to show you one example where we're going to do a group by in a minute, and that will probably make the difference stand out even more. So let's go ahead and look at the group by. I've gone ahead now and rewritten the query to take into account a group by operation. So let's have a look at that. So first things, I'm going to go ahead and check whether we have any statistics. So we don't have any, and I'm now going to disable auto create statistics on the database and run the query. And as you can see here, we've got the first results, so just give it a second. And then we've got the second one, and as you can see right now, because of the group by and the sum operation, we have some temp table work as well. So you'll see right now we've got read ahead reads of 7,729, and if you look at the execution plan, you'll see that a significant amount of the effort is in terms of scanning the database table, as well as the sort operation that's going on in the background. So if you look over here right now, the execution time is close to about 6 to 6.5 seconds. What we'll do next is we'll enable auto create statistics, and we'll run the same queries again. And you'll see that immediately the query is executing a lot faster, and you'll also see that now the read ahead reads have disappeared and the execution time is 1.5 seconds as opposed to 6 seconds, 6.5 seconds before. And that is essentially because of the fact that the statistics is available and SQL Server is able to make a much more informed decision about how to go about executing this query. So you'll see that the sort operator is now at the very end, and there's a hash match aggregation, and the group by is happening towards the beginning, and it's only sorting at the last stage. This is all possible only because the statistics provide accurate data. To prove that this is actually the case, what we'll do is we'll just run this query again one more time after disabling the statistics, and obviously I need to delete whatever statistics was created in the previous step, so let me do that as well. And let's run this query again, now without statistics once again, and immediately you will see that as soon as the statistics have disappeared, the execution time now goes back to about 6.5 seconds. And you can see that over here in a moment, where the read ahead reads are there happening on the temp database, and the execution time is again back to about 6.5 seconds. So that's kind of where we are with statistics, auto create statistics. There's really no downside to enabling it, and as best practice, I think definitely this is one of those features where every DBA automatically should have that set up to auto create statistics true or on. Basically, it definitely helps SQL Server come up with a more efficient execution plan. So that's pretty much what I want to show you in this video. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how this plays well with other features that we have. Again, as you might have noticed when I showed you the first screen, there are other options available pertaining to statistics, and they all have different behaviors depending on what combination of them you use. So we'll be talking about how auto update statistics and auto update statistics asynchronously plays when auto create statistics is enabled, etc. So stay tuned for that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.